They sent Chinese girl to clean his barn as a cruel joke, but rancher refused to let her go. The boarding house kitchen smelled of weak tea and simmering malice. 7 girls huddled around the rough-hewn table, their whispers sharp as broken glass as they pointed at a notice tacked to the wall. Owen Croft's Ranch. Help wanted, barn cleaning. Fair pay. Fair pay, one of the girls, Clara, snorted. For working under that monster? He broke the arm of the last man who worked for him. Fired 3 in a month, another added, her voice a harsh thrill. My pa says he's got a temper colder and quicker than a winter snake. They all knew the stories. Owen Croft, the stone-faced rancher whose land bordered the edge of civilization. He lived alone, a ghost in his own life, working his sprawling property with a fury that frightened even the most hardened men. He spoke to no one, his words as rare and valuable as gold nuggets, and usually just as hard. And now, he needed help. Who in their right mind would take that job? A girl named Betty asked, her eyes scanning the room. The chatter died. Slowly, like predators turning on the weakest of the herd, every gaze settled on the corner of the room. Mai sat on a low stool, her back to them, mending a frayed tablecloth. Her fingers, nimble and precise, moved in a silent, steady rhythm, her stitches nearly invisible. She didn't look up, a lesson learned through years of harsh experience. To meet their eyes was to invite their cruelty. Mai, Clara called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Mai's hands froze over the fabric, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. You're not busy tomorrow, are you? Mai shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. She kept her eyes fixed on the white linen, praying she could somehow merge with the shadows. Perfect Clara stood, tearing the notice from the wall with a theatrical flourish. She sauntered over and dropped it into Mai's lap. You'll go clean the rancher's barn. Mai's throat felt as if it were packed with dust. I cannot. Why not? Clara's voice sharpened. You clean here, don't you? It's what your kind is good at. But they say he is a harsh man, Mai whispered, the words barely audible. Clara laughed, a sound like scraping metal. So what? You're used to harshness, aren't you? The other girls erupted in laughter. Another girl, Rose, circled closer, her shadow falling over Mai's work. Besides, you're so quiet and obedient. He'll probably appreciate that. You won't talk back, will you? More laughter echoed off the grimy kitchen walls. Mai's cheeks burned with a familiar, helpless shame. Look at her, someone whispered, loud enough for the entire room to hear. Like a little china doll. Think he'll break her? Maybe he'll send her back in a box, another cackled. All the way back to where she came from. The room roared with their amusement. Mai's hands trembled, clutching the tablecloth so tightly her knuckles went white. She focused on the needle, on the thread, on the tiny hole, trying to shrink herself, to disappear into the task at hand. It settled, then, Clara announced, her voice filled with finality. You leave at first light. Don't be late. And don't come back until the joke plays out, Rose added with a sneer. If he throws you out on your ear, that's your problem. Mai opened her mouth to protest, to beg, but the words wouldn't form. All that came out was a small, choked sound. The girls, their entertainment concluded, turned away, their conversation shifting to town gossip and flirtations, leaving Mai isolated in her corner. The crumpled notice felt like a lead weight in her lap. She wanted to refuse, to tear it to shreds, to stand up and walk away. But where could she go? She had no family left, no money, no place in this harsh, unwelcoming land. The boarding house, with its constant, low-grade torment, was the only home she had. If the matron discovered she had refused offered work, she'd be cast out onto the street without a second thought. With a heavy heart, she folded the paper, tucked it deep into her apron pocket, and made her way up the creaking stairs to the small, cold attic room she called her own. That night, Mai lay awake on her thin straw mattress, the laughter of the other girls echoing in her memory. China doll. Break her. Send her back. The words were barbs that hooked deep into her soul. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the frantic beat of her own heart, and whispered into the oppressive darkness, "Why was I brought to this land?" The only answer was the lonely sound of the wind rattling the eaves. Dawn arrived as a smear of grey against the dark sky. Mai dressed in her plainest work dress, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. She braided her long, dark hair tightly and slipped out of the boarding house while the world was still asleep. The walk to Owen Croft's ranch was long and arduous, taking her over an hour on the dusty, rutted road. By the time the ranch came into view, a collection of stark, weathered buildings against the vast, empty landscape, her legs ached and a nervous sweat dampened the collar of her dress. The ranch was immense, larger than she could have imagined. Fences snaked over the rolling hills, and a herd of horses grazed peacefully in a distant pasture. At the heart of it all stood the barn, a massive structure, its wood faded to the color of bone. Its doors hung open, looking like a great, dark mouth waiting to swallow her whole. My stomach churned with fear. Then she heard it. A loud, splintering crash from within the barn, followed by a man's voice, a low growl of pure, unrestrained fury. "Damn worthless piece of..." Another crash, louder this time. She froze at the gate, her hand gripping the rough wood of the post so hard she felt a splinter pierce her skin. Peering through the wide barn doors, she could see him. Owen Croft. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and powerful, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He was holding the splintered remains of a wagon wheel, his entire body taut with rage. With a guttural roar, he hurled it across the barn, where it shattered against the far wall. He stood there for a moment, chest heaving, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Mai's breath hitched. This was the monster they had sent her to. The devil with a temper. Every instinct screamed at her to turn, to run, to flee back to the relative safety of the town. But just as she was about to retreat, he turned, and his eyes, dark, hard, and utterly unreadable, locked onto hers. For a long, terrifying moment, neither of them moved. The silence was stretched thin, ready to snap. Then Owen spoke, his voice a low, rough rasp. "What are you doing here?" Mai's mouth felt dry as dust. The words caught in her throat. I was sent to clean the barn." His eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her from head to toe. "Sent by who?" The boarding house," she stammered. "They said you needed help." Owen stared at her, his jaw working silently. She could see the anger still simmering in him, a dangerous fire banked just beneath the surface. He let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "They sent you." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of dawning, disgusted realization. Mai's cheeks burned. She knew what he saw. What they all saw. A small, foreign woman. Fragile, meek, powerless. A joke. Owen turned away, raking a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "Go home." Mai blinked, stunned. "What?" "I said, go home," he repeated, his voice sharp. "I don't need help from someone they sent as a prank." Her chest tightened. She should go. She should turn and walk away and never look back. But the memory of the girl's laughter, the matron's cold eyes, and the ever-present threat of being cast out with nowhere to go, fueled a spark of desperate courage. Her voice, when it came, was stronger than she expected. "I need the work." Owen stopped and turned back to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "You need it," he echoed flatly. "Yes." He studied her for another long, unnerving moment, his gaze so intense she felt it like a physical touch. Then, with a sigh of resignation, he gestured toward a broom leaning against the barn wall. "Fine. You want to work? Then work. Don't talk. Don't get in my way." Mai nodded quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Owen turned and stalked back toward the wreckage of the wagon wheel, his boots kicking up dust with every heavy step. Mai picked up the broom, its handle worn smooth by use. For the first time in her life, she didn't run from the anger. She stood right in the heart of it. The barn was in chaos. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, and the air was heavy with the smell of hay, manure, and old leather. Broken tools were piled in corners, and a saddle lay overturned, its leather cracked and neglected. Mai took a deep breath and began to sweep. Her arms ached within minutes, and the dust made her cough, but she didn't stop. She worked with a focused intensity, creating order from the disarray. Outside, Owen began hammering, repairing a section of fence with brutal, efficient force. Each blow of the hammer was a sharp report that echoed across the ranch, a percussive rhythm of his contained fury. Hours slipped by. The sun climbed high into the sky, beating down on the ranch. Mai's dress was soaked with sweat, and blisters were forming on her palms, but slowly, miraculously, the barn began to transform under her care. The floor was cleared, the hay was stacked in neat piles, and the tools were hung in their proper places. She worked in the silence she knew so well, making herself as unobtrusive as possible. Midday came and went. Owen hadn't spoken another word to her. Mai finally paused, leaning against a stall door to catch her breath, her stomach rumbling with a hunger she ignored. "You missed a spot." Mai jumped, startled by his voice so close behind her. Owen stood in the doorway, a tall, imposing silhouette against the bright afternoon sun. He pointed to a dark corner. "There. Under the manger." Mai nodded quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "My apologies. I will fix it." He watched her for a moment longer, his expression still a mask of stone, then turned and went back to his work. Her hands trembled slightly as she swept the corner clean. She had braced herself for cruelty, for him to yell at her, to throw something, to send her away as the girls had predicted. But he hadn't. He was cold, demanding, but not cruel. He was just a man drowning in an ocean of his own anger. By late afternoon, she had finished the main floor and climbed the rickety ladder to the hayloft, sweeping away years of accumulated dust and cobwebs from the rafters. She was working there when she heard footsteps below. Owen stood at the base of the ladder, holding a tin cup. "Come down," he commanded. Mai descended carefully, her legs shaking with fatigue. He held out the cup to her. It was filled with water, cool and clear. She stared at it, then at him, confused. "I do not wish to be a bother." "You're no good to me if you collapse from thirst," he said, his voice gruff, but there was something in it that had softened almost imperceptibly. She took the cup with trembling hands and drank deeply. The water was the most refreshing thing she had ever tasted. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Owen just grunted in response and walked back toward the fence line. Mai watched him go, the cool tin cup still clutched in her hands. For the first time since she had arrived, the knot of fear in her chest loosened just a little. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, Mai finished her work in the loft and climbed down. Her entire body ached with a profound weariness she had never known, but the barn was pristine. Every tool was in its place, every surface was clean. She stood in the doorway, looking at her handiwork, and felt a quiet, unfamiliar flicker of pride. Owen appeared from the pasture, leading a horse by the reins. He tethered it to a post and then glanced into the barn. His eyes swept over the clean floor, the organized tools, the neatly stacked hay. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he said, his voice quiet, "You're still here." "You said to work," she replied softly. "So I worked." Owen's jaw tightened. He stepped into the barn, his boots echoing on the swept floorboards. He ran a hand along a wooden beam, then looked at his fingers. They came away clean. "The girls at the boarding house," he said slowly, not looking at her. "They sent you here to fail. To be humiliated." Mai's throat tightened. She could only nod in response. Owen finally turned to face her, the last light of day catching the hard planes of his face. "Why did you stay?" I needed the work," she said. "Is that all?" Mai hesitated, then spoke the truth, her voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to prove them wrong." Owen studied her, and for the first time, his expression was not hard or angry. It was something else entirely, something akin to understanding. "You did good work today," he said finally. The simple word struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall. "Thank you," she managed to say. He gave a single, sharp nod and walked toward the small ranch house. He paused at the door and looked back at her over his shoulder. "Be back at dawn. There's more to do." Mai's breath caught in her throat. You want me to come back? You want the work or not?" he asked, his voice returning to its familiar gruffness. "Yes. Yes, I do." "Then be here at dawn with that." He disappeared inside, closing the door behind him. Mai stood alone in the gathering twilight, her body screaming with exhaustion, her hands raw and blistered. But her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Here, she wasn't a joke. She wasn't a china doll, she was a worker. And for the first time in a very, very long time, someone had told her she had done good work. The walk back to the boarding house felt different, shorter. When she entered the kitchen, the girls were there, laughing over their supper. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Clara called out. "The joke returns." "How long did you last?" "An hour." "Did he throw a pitchfork at you?" another jeered. Mai walked past them without a word, her head held a little higher than before. She climbed the stairs to her attic room, washed the grime from her face and hands, and lay down on her mattress. Let them laugh. Tomorrow, she would be back at the ranch. Because Owen Croft hadn't laughed at her. He had given her water. He had told her she did good work. And in a world that had relentlessly tried to break her spirit, those small acts of decency felt like the first foundation stones of a bridge to a place she never thought she could reach. Outside, the first stars began to pierce the deep blue of the sky. Mai closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, not to the girls, not to the matron, but to the angry, silent rancher who had allowed her to prove she was more than what they saw." And miles away, in a house built by rough hands and guarded by walls of silence, Owen Croft sat by his fireplace, staring into the flickering flames. For the first time in years, the barn was clean. For the first time in years, someone had worked without a word of complaint. For the first time in years, the oppressive silence in his house didn't feel quite so heavy. He thought of the quiet girl with the trembling hands and the steady gaze. The one they had sent as a joke, the one who had refused to be broken. And something deep inside him, a part of himself he had buried long ago beneath the pain of his father's fists and his mother's fear, began to stir. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something far more fundamental, recognition. He recognized the endurance in her eyes, the quiet strength of someone who had weathered countless storms. And he realized, with a startling clarity, that she was stronger than anyone in this town gave her credit for, including herself.